Chapter 8. The forest was now boiling with people, for the Vyosk villagers had come behind the klezmer to greet Shmuel and his friends. Hannah hung back. More people meant more greetings and more excuses. It was worse than any family party at home. At home! The skin on her face suddenly felt stretched tight across her cheekbones, and her eyes began to prickle with tears. Where was her home? She forced herself to recall the house in New Rochelle with its borders of flowers and the flagstone walk, but the image seemed to be fading, especially when compared with the forest full of villagers and the tiny house and horse barn she'd left just hours before. A hand on her arm riveted her to the moment. "Come, Kaya," Gittel said. "Come and meet your new aunt-to-be." Pulling Hannah past the noisy celebrants, Gittel led her to the one wagon facing the rest, where the men were busy at work encouraging the two strong workhorses to turn around. On that wagon sat two people, one an older man dressed all in black, with a white prayer shawl across his shoulders, a book in his lap. The other was one of the most beautiful women Hannah had ever seen, like a movie star. She was all in white, with an elegantly beaded headdress capping her hair. That hair was jet black, so black that it didn't even have lighter highlights, and electric with curls spilling over her shoulders. There were gold rings on her fingers and gold dangling from her ears. She had a strong nose and a fierce, piercing look, like a bird of prey. "Faye," Gittel said, "this is my niece, Kaya." Hannah wondered how, with all the noise and excitement, Faye even heard Gittel's introduction, but she looked down from the wagon, those eagle eyes staring. Then she smiled, not at all fiercely, but even shyly. "The Lubliner. Come, you must be exhausted walking all this way after having been so sick. Shmuel would never forgive me if I did not let you ride. And what a pretty dress. You put us all to shame." She leaned down and offered her hand. "I will not say I told you so," Gittel whispered into Hannah's ear, "but I did." As if in a dream, Hannah reached up for Faye's hand. She expected a princess's hand, small, fine-boned, soft, but Faye's hand was large and strong, with calluses in the palm. When she was up by Faye's side, she could smell a scent on her hair and dress, like roses and wood shavings after a long rain. "Now," Faye said, turning toward her and smiling broadly, "tell me all about Lublin." The bride's wagon was turned around at last, and the procession started up again. This time the klezmer was behind, far back at the end of the line of villagers. Hannah's new friends danced by the wagon's side, hands joined, singing. "Who asked you to get married? Who asked you to be buried alive? You know that no one forced you. You took this madness on yourself." "I always hated the Cherelle," Faye said. "Such a gloomy song for so glorious an event." "What's the Cherelle?" Hannah asked. "The wedding dance your friends are doing. You do not play such games in Lublin? Perhaps you are smarter than we." Hannah looked down at the girls. Some younger girls had joined them, and the line was twisting and turning to the rhythm of the song. "New Rochelle," she murmured, though this time it was more a prayer than a statement. Faye didn't seem to hear. "Oh, Kaya, never mind the Cherelle. We will sing and dance other things all night long. The grandmothers will dance the pop dance well. Shmuel's grandmother is gone, may she rest in peace, but Gittel can dance with my grandmother. You should see my grandmother, so light and quick, and you too, Kaya, you will dance. Oh, only if you are feeling well enough. We will have great fun. You will see." She patted Hannah's hand. The wagon bumped along the road, swaying from side to side. Hannah wished she could get down and looked longingly at the ground. "What is it, Kanale?" Faye asked. "Is it much longer?" "Around one more big bend and we will be there, at my village, at Vyosk. Would you believe it? My village for but a few more hours and then my village no more. And would you guess that as excited as I am about marrying my beloved Shmuel, a part of me is also afraid?" Hannah laughed out loud. "Shmuel said the same thing this morning." "Did he? Did he?" Faye's eyes lit up and suddenly she looked very young, not that much older than Hannah. "Tell me exactly what he said." Hannah closed her eyes, trying to remember. He said, yes? He said he wasn't afraid of being married, only of getting married." Reb Baruch cleared his throat loudly. Oh, Kaya, Faye said, ignoring her father. Thank you for telling me that. She gave Hannah a hug. We are going to be such friends, you and I. Best friends. Life will be good to us forever and ever, I know. The wagon made a wide turn around the bend in the path, the horses straining mightily. One blew out its nostrils, a loud huffing. Ahead, where the path widened out, was a meadow and beyond it a town. Hannah called over her shoulder to the dancing girls. We're here! The words springing easily to her mouth. The girls dropped hands and stared down the path. When Hannah looked up again, she could see Vyosk laid out at the far end of the meadow. Picture postcard pretty. Small houses nestled in a line, and the larger buildings, none higher than 3 stories, stood behind, like mothers with their children. As the horses pulled them closer, Hannah could distinguish a central open market with stalls surrounded by stores. There was a pharmacy topped by a large black sign, a barber shop with its familiar peppermint stick, a glass-fronted tavern, and a dozen other shops. In the middle of the market, a tall wooden pole supported a bell. Behind the open market was a towering wooden building with 4 separate roofed sections and fenced-in courtyards. The dominant color was brown wooden buildings, brown sandy streets, as if it were a faded photograph, yet it was real. Papa, Faye said, turning to him, what are those automobiles and trucks doing in front of the show? She pointed to one of the big buildings. Is it another surprise for the wedding? Oh, Papa! She gave him a hug, and his normally dour face lit up. Hannah looked where Faye was pointing. In the middle of the brown landscape, like a dark stain, were 3 black, old-fashioned cars and 12 army trucks strung out behind. She gave an involuntary shudder. They reminded her of something. She couldn't think what. Faye's father cleared his throat and closed the book on his lap. I do not make surprises, he said gruffly. Only my children make surprises. Then what are those automobiles and trucks doing in front of our show? Faye asked. The wagon continued its slow side-to-side pace toward the town, but behind it the villagers grew silent as one by one they noticed what sat in front of the synagogue. Shmuel hurried forward. Putting his hand on the wagon, close to Faye's hand but not quite touching it, he addressed her father formally. Reb Baruch, excuse me, Shmuel said, but do you know just what it is that lies ahead? I am not a fortune-teller, nor yet a Batchin, Reb Baruch said. It is to God you must address such questions. Just then the door of the first car opened and a man in black uniform with high black boots stepped out. He turned and opened the car's back door. Another man, similarly dressed, unfolded himself from the seat. The metals on his chest caught the light from the spring sun, sending undecipherable signals across the market to them. Somehow the Batchin materialized in front of the wagon. He pointed to the man with the medals and cried out, I see the Malach HaMavi! I see the angel of death! Hannah felt the breath catch in her throat. Malach HaMavi. That was her grandfather's phrase, the one he had shouted at her when she drew the long number on her arm. Angel of death. Slowly, carefully, she turned to Shmuel, afraid to move too quickly, afraid she might not be quick enough. Please, Shmuel, what year is it? Please. He laughed, but there was little brightness in it. They do not have the same year in Lublin? Please. Faye put her hand on Hannah's. Silly child, she said, her voice curiously hushed. It is 5701. 5701? But this can't be the future, Hannah said. It doesn't look like the future. You don't have movies or new cars or... Her voice was hoarse. She has been this way ever since she arrived, Faye, Shmuel said, shaking his head. Sometimes she is lucid, other times she talks of Rochelle's and needles and snakes. He tapped his finger to his forehead. It is the sickness, I think, and the loss of her parents. Now she talks of the future. Reb Baruch cleared his throat. I think the child means Leuten Christlichen Loa, according to the Christian calendar. They do not know from the Jewish calendar in Lublin? Faye asked. 1942. It is several days before Passover, the Batchin said. Before Passover? Hannah drew in a deep breath, and then, all of a sudden, she knew. She knew beyond any doubt where she was. She was not Hannah Stern of New Rochelle, at least not anymore, though she still had Hannah's memories. Those memories, at least, might serve as a warning. The men down there, she cried out desperately. They're not wedding guests. They're Nazis. Nazis, do you understand? They kill people. They will kill Jews, hundreds of them, thousands of them, 6 million of them. I know. Don't ask me how I know. I just do. We have to turn the wagons around. We have to run. Reb Baruch shook his head. There are not 6 million Jews in all of Poland, my child. No, Rabbi, 6 million in Poland and Germany and Holland and France and... My child, such a number. He shook his head and smiled, but the corners of his mouth turned down instead of up. And as for running, where would we run to? God is everywhere. There will always be Nazis among us. No, my child, do not tremble before mere men. It is God before whom we must tremble, only God. We will go ahead just as we have planned. After all, this is our shtetl, not theirs, and there is still a wedding to be made. He lifted his hand. On his signal, the wagon started up again across the last few yards to the market. As they moved closer, more men in dark uniforms got out of their cars and truck cabs. They made a perfect half circle in front of the synagogue doors, like a steel trap with gaping jaws ready to be